Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really central to the Unification Church, or the UC as many call it. We're talking about the Family Pledge Ceremony instituted by Reverend Sun Myung Moon. And this is, well, it's so much more than a simple prayer. It's not just a quiet promise you make at home. Our sources show this ritual binds not just spiritual goals, but the tiny day-to-day details of life for members. It basically turns everything into an act of worship.
It's an incredibly intense focus. And for anyone who really wants to understand this movement on a global scale, the ceremony is like an immediate, unfiltered lens.
A window into their worldview.
Exactly. It's a window. It weaves together the very personal stuff, family life, with these huge communal, spiritual, and even socio-political ambitions.
Okay, so we've got a pile of sources here. We have historical accounts, theological breakdowns, sociological studies, all focused on how this one pledge shapes people's lives.
Right. And what all this gives you, the listener, is a chance to grasp really quickly how the UC structure sees the family. It's not just a family, it's a microcosm of their kingdom of heaven on earth.
So it's kind of a shortcut to understanding them.
A huge shortcut. It helps you understand how a single ritual can build an entire identity within this, highly visible but often misunderstood movement.
All right, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to explore where it came from, the deep theological why behind it, the really meticulous how of the ritual, and what it all means in the real world. We're going to stick to the facts, the structure, and some of the more surprising details. So to start, you really have to go back to the history, to Sun Myung Moon himself.
How so?
He was born in what's now North Korea, Hwanghae province, growing up in the 20s and 30s. This was during the Japanese colonization. A really harsh, turbulent time.
And that context of, oppression and loss, so important. It really informs his whole mission.
It does. And the sources say his path was basically set in 1939. He was 19, and he reported having this vision, a commission, really, to complete the mission of restoring humanity to its original sin-free condition.
That whole context, that search for restoration, both for his country and for himself spiritually, is just crucial. It lays all the groundwork for a theology where restoring the family is put at the very, very center of everything.
And that vision later becomes the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, founded in 1954.
Yes.
So to get the pledge, we have to get the theology.
Yeah.
And central to all of this is the concept of the true parents. Who are they? Why are they so necessary?
The true parents are Reverend Moon and his wife, Hak Ja-han. In their theology, they are seen as the first couple to successfully embody that perfect divine ideal. They're a spiritual authority, free from the results of what they call the fall.
The fall of Adam and Eve.
Exactly.
Right.
The whole doctrine is about restoration, which is just the process of reversing that original sin, that act of disobedience by the first human couple.
So the fall happened through the family, which means restoration must also happen through the family.
Precisely. You've got it. Restoration is meant to fix that original flaw, and it happens through what the church calls the blessing, their sacred marriage ceremony. So the family isn't just a social unit. It is, in their words, the smallest kingdom. It's the blueprint for the whole world.
Wow. So the idea is that one perfect family becomes the model to build heaven on earth, one household at a time.
That's the revolutionary idea for the group, yes.
Okay, that makes sense as a vision, but it's a huge leap from that to this structured, institutionalized ritual. At first, it was just informal promises.
Right. In the early days, it was much more personal. But as the movement grew, especially in the 1970s, they needed something more formal, something communal that could be repeated anywhere. So it was institutionalized in the late 70s.
To build that collective identity.
To reinforce it, yeah. And it's interesting how it blends things. It draws on Christian covenant theology, that idea of a contract with God. But it also pulls really heavily from Korean Confucian family rites. Reverence for ancestors, hierarchy in the family. It's all in there.
So if the why is restoration, let's get into the how. What does the ceremony actually look like?
It's very, very structured. It's often planned to coincide with the big blessing ceremony, the mass weddings.
Right.
And the preparation beforehand is pretty intense. People have to study the divine principle, which is their core theology, basically their rereading of the Bible. They also have to write a personal testimony about their spiritual journey and their commitment.
That choreography must just amplify how important it feels.
It absolutely does. The family gathers together, and the person presiding, usually the father figure, reads a long passage about the theology. Then comes the main event, the standardized oath.
Okay, let's pause there. The oath itself. The sources say it has 4 very specific commitments.
It does, and they're really revealing. They cover everything. First, they vow to obey the true parents as the earthly representatives of God's authority. That's the living covenant part.
Okay, what's second?
Second, they promise to actively support the spiritual development of everyone in their family. A big focus on the kids' religious education.
And the third is more personal.
Yes, the third is a vow to cultivate true love, which they define as love that's totally free from selfishness. And the fourth is a big one, dedication to worldly service.
Which isn't just giving money.
No. It means getting actively involved in the church's social projects, their businesses, peace-building stuff around the world.
And after they say the words, there's a physical visual element too, isn't there?
Yes, the hand-in-hand symbolism. Everyone presses their palms together to form this interlocking circle. It's a visual of their bond. Then they get a physical family token.
Like a certificate.
Kind of more like a small plaque or medallion they're meant to display in their home. And it's not a one-time thing. They're encouraged to do an annual renewal to reaffirm the vows every year.
This sounds like it completely redefines the relationship between, God and just daily domestic life.
That's the entire point.
Yeah.
The family becomes a living covenant.
Right.
And this gets back to what they call the two-tier authority model. You have divine authority at the top, Heavenly Father and Mother, and then earthly authority flows down from the true parents. And this is key. It positions the head of the family as the local representative of divine will.
Whoa. The local head as a divine representative? That's intense. Doesn't that sort of collapse the difference between worship and just doing the chores?
In a way, it's designed to. The pledge is meant to turn all of that, the meals, the arguments, the homework, into continuous worship. The teaching is every act done in love becomes an offering to God. It gives everything a spiritual purpose.
So if the pledge is this central, its public nature must have huge social effects inside the group.
Oh, massive. It's like a powerful identity marker. When you do it, you get a recognized spiritual lineage.
Yeah.
It really enhances group cohesion. And within the community, it's a major credential.
It sounds a bit like social capital, too.
It absolutely is. Pledge takers can get preferential access to things like scholarships for the Unification Seminary, or opportunities in their businesses, or leadership roles.
And researchers have noted internal benefits, too, right? Beyond just access.
Yes, studies point to increased feelings of belonging, less anxiety, because everyone is operating from the same playbook. For married couples, there are reports of higher marital satisfaction, likely because of that shared spiritual framework.
Of course, we have to be balanced here and talk about the critiques, the controversies that come with a ritual, this binding.
That's essential. One of the big tensions that critics bring up is autonomy versus authority. The pledge's focus on obedience to the true parents can be seen by outsiders as, suppressing individual thought, especially for younger members raised in societies that value individualism.
And what about allegations of coercion, because it's so public?
Right. While the church says it's completely voluntary, sociological analysis points out that the public nature creates really strong internal pressure. I mean, if you're the one person in the family who says no, that can lead to major tension or even being ostracized. Peer pressure in these high-commitment groups is a very powerful, if subtle, force.
And we have to mention the cult-like label that the media has often used, stemming from that centralized authority of the true parents.
That label usually comes from that two-tier authority model we talked about. Another big point of misunderstanding is that fourth commitment, worldly service.
Okay.
That requirement to be active in their local enterprises. Outsiders sometimes misread that as forced labor or economic exploitation.
But how do members see it?
Generally, members describe it as a voluntary calling, a way to fulfill their mission of building the kingdom of heaven on earth. They see it as contributing time to projects like schools or humanitarian aid. That line between voluntary contribution and forced labor is often where the controversy really lies.
Right. It seems to mirror the intensity of tithing or volunteer hours you see in other faiths, but maybe amplified by that global missionary goal.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How does a ritual like this survive and even change in our globalized world? I was fascinated by the evolution of gender roles within the ceremony.
It's a great example of how a tradition has to respond to the outside world. I mean,
Right.
Traditionally, it was very patriarchal, reflecting Korean Confucian culture. The father was the channel of divine authority.
But that's changing.
It is. Under the influence of globalization and gender equity movements, we're seeing shifts. There are now co-leadership models.
So both parents are involved in leading it.
Exactly. They share speaking roles.
Mm-hmm.
And you see inclusivity statements being added, emphasizing mutual respect. The pledge even includes promises to support the spiritual growth of mothers, which is a formal acknowledgement of their spiritual role.
And since this is a global faith now, with members all over the place, it's had to adapt technologically too.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing some pretty sophisticated digital adaptations. They live stream ceremonies for members who can't travel. They even have online pledge platforms for digital submissions, so the lineage continues no matter where you are.
Combine that with cross-cultural fusion, and you must get some really unique
You
ceremonies.
do. As it spreads, local elements get mixed in. So in the US, you might see the pledge just integrated into a normal-looking wedding reception. But then in Brazil, you might hear rhythmic drums or local songs alongside the traditional hymns. The aesthetic changes, but the core vows stay the same.
If we zoom out, how does this pledge really compare to vows in other major religions, like a Catholic marriage or an Islamic nikah?
Well, they all share common ground, right? Mutual commitment, spiritual goals, public vows. But the family pledge stands out on two main points. First is that explicit obedience to a living spiritual leadership, the true parents. That's pretty unique.
And the second.
The second is how it integrates a global missionary agenda right into the family contract. The family itself becomes the main engine for restoring the world.
And looking forward, our sources say they're not done innovating, not by a long shot. We're talking about more gender equality in the liturgy, but some of the tech integrations sound like science fiction.
They're testing things that would have been unimaginable a couple decades ago. I mean, virtual reality ceremonies are being piloted in South Korea.
Seriously. VR.
Yes. So remote families can have a fully immersive experience. And there's talk of using AI-assisted counseling before someone takes the pledge to help them explore their motivations and make sure they're aligned with the divine principle.
So after all this, what does it all mean for us, the listener?
I think it means the pledge is just deeply multifaceted. Theologically, it's this living covenant. Culturally, it takes Korean traditions and makes them global. And socially, it's a binding contract that creates enormous cohesion and social capital. It's really a remarkable case study in how a high-commitment ritual defines identity in a modern, globalized religion.
The core tension here seems to be that blend of really intense personal devotion with this absolute communal commitment. And as, societies everywhere struggle with the pull between individual freedom and collective responsibility, the family pledge offers this really distinct high-stakes model for how a group can achieve cohesion.
It really just highlights the power of these kinds of rituals in an age that's often defined by low commitment. It shows how deeply people are willing to invest when the purpose is framed as something so grand, so restorative.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to think about. If this intense, family-based contract is proving to drive so much collective civic engagement through worldly service, what lessons, if any, could secular groups or even policymakers take from a commitment model this strong to encourage collective action on other issues? That is something to keep thinking about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we encourage you to continue your own exploration.